1967, Nashville, Tennessee. A legend finds another legend dying in an alley, addicted, broken, and ready to give up on life. What Johnny Cash did next didn't just save Waylon Jennings' life, it revealed the true heart of the man in black that the world never knew. This is the untold story of friendship, redemption, and how one man's compassion pulled another back from the edge of death. This is the story of how Johnny Cash became a real hero. By 1967, both Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings were riding high on the country music charts. To the outside world, they had it all: fame, fortune, adoring fans. But behind the curtain, both men were fighting demons that threatened to destroy them. Waylon Jennings had become a prisoner to amphetamines. What started as a way to stay awake during long tours had spiraled into a full-blown addiction. He was taking up to 80 pills a day, sometimes more. His hands shook constantly. He couldn't eat, he couldn't sleep without them, and he couldn't function with them. Johnny Cash knew this darkness intimately. He'd been battling his own addiction to amphetamines for years. He'd destroyed his first marriage, alienated his children, and nearly killed himself multiple times. If anyone understood what Waylon was going through, it was Cash, and that knowledge would soon save a life. It was a cold November night in Nashville. Johnny Cash was driving home from a recording session when he decided to take a detour through Music Row. What he saw in that dark alley would haunt him and save him forever. There, slumped against a brick wall surrounded by trash and broken bottles, was Waylon Jennings. At first, Cash thought he was dead. Waylon's skin was gray, his lips were blue, and he wasn't moving. Cash jumped out of his car and ran to him. Waylon was barely breathing. His pulse was weak and irregular. He'd been taking pills for 3 days straight without sleep or food. His body was shutting down. Most people would have called an ambulance and walked away. Johnny Cash made a different choice, one that would define who he really was.
Cash lifted Waylon, who could barely stand, and half-carried, half-dragged him to his car. Waylon mumbled incoherently, not even recognizing his friend. Cash drove straight to his house, not to a hospital. He knew what Waylon needed wasn't just medical treatment, it was someone who understood, someone who'd been there, someone who wouldn't give up on him. When Cash arrived home with Waylon, June Carter was waiting. She took one look at the barely conscious man in her husband's arms and said, "Bring him in, we'll take care of him. No questions asked, no judgment, just immediate, unconditional help." They set up Waylon in their guest room. Cash knew what was coming. The withdrawal would be hell. He'd been through it himself. The sweating, the shaking, the hallucinations, the pain so intense you'd rather die than continue. But he also knew something else. With the right support, Waylon could survive it. The first 48 hours were the worst. Waylon's body revolted against the sudden absence of amphetamines. He shook so violently that the bed frame rattled against the wall. He vomited until there was nothing left. He hallucinated, seeing things that weren't there, screaming at shadows. Johnny Cash never left his side. Hour after hour, day after day, he sat in that chair next to Waylon's bed. When Waylon screamed that bugs were crawling on him, Cash held his hands and told him they weren't real. When Waylon begged for just one pill, just one to make it stop, Cash said no and stayed there to enforce it. June brought food that Waylon couldn't eat, water he could barely keep down, and cold compresses for his burning forehead. She changed his sweat-soaked sheets multiple times a day. She sang hymns softly when the screaming got too intense. Together, Johnny and June became Waylon's lifeline. "You're going to make it," Cash told Waylon every single day. "I know you don't believe me now, but you're going to make it. I made it, you'll make it too." Those words, repeated like a mantra, became Waylon's anchor to reality when everything else felt like it was falling apart.
On day 5, something changed. Waylon woke up and his eyes were clear for the first time in years. He was weak, thin as a rail, but the fog had lifted. He looked at Johnny Cash sitting in that same chair he'd occupied for nearly a week and started crying. "Why?" Waylon asked. "Why did you do this for me?" Cash's answer was simple. "Because someone should have done it for me years ago. Because you're worth saving. Because that's what friends do." Waylon stayed at the Cash house for 3 more weeks, slowly regaining his strength. They played guitar together, wrote songs, talked about their demons, and made promises to each other about staying clean. It was during those quiet weeks that a friendship forged in crisis became one of the strongest bonds in country music history. Waylon Jennings went on to have one of the most successful careers in country music. He became a pioneer of the outlaw country movement, sold millions of records, and lived another 35 years, clean and sober. He never forgot what Johnny Cash did for him. Years later, in interviews, Waylon would always get emotional when talking about those weeks at the Cash house. "Johnny saved my life," he'd say. "He didn't have to. He could have just called an ambulance and gone home. But he took me into his house, into his family, and he fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself." This story reveals something essential about Johnny Cash that gets lost in the legend. Yes, he was the man in black. Yes, he sang for prisoners and outcasts. But more than that, he was a man who'd been to hell and used that experience to pull others back from the edge. He understood that redemption isn't just about saving yourself, it's about using your survival to save someone else. That's the real legacy of Johnny Cash, not just the music, but the lives he touched and the souls he saved when nobody else would try.